Hey everyone and welcome back to the news. We've got a great show lined up for you today, but first, you might have noticed something new. So, the first stage of our animation revamp, and basically our editing revamp, was in the last video. We've got a bunch more work to do there, but, well, I think it looks a hell of a lot more slick. There's more to come there, and it's all because we've brought on a second editor, and we've got a new rock-solid double verification QC process to catch errors, and that's all being made possible by the support of our patrons. And this month, it's Demon Hunter and Pin month. And man, I think this pin is the nicest thing the art team has ever made. Turns out that our jewelry-inspired channel logo actually makes for a pretty darn good bit of jewelry. So that's on this month's Patreon Master tier, and the last video is just a little bit of a look at the kind of improvements we're going to be making across all of our channels and all of our content. And with that, let's get into the news. This week for Classic, we've got the launch of Phase 2, the end of layering, and a bit of a blow to no changes, but not really. Then Contemporary World of Warcraft has further updates to the PTR, including Titanic Purifications, a grindable socket, and broadcast text for you N'Zoth believers. Then further to this, we've seen hotfixes for Alterac Valley, and also we've seen our first little glimpse at the Shadowlands character customization revamp. Broadcast text pertinent to the gift of N'Zoth has been revealed, and depending on your character's choice there, you'll be able to find out the reaction of the wider N'Zoth community to their master's defeat. Non-believers will be turned away from these conversations, but true believers in N'Zoth will be told things like this: "We were blind, we are now blind, I must blind the eyes, and we should be careful, those who defeated him might come for us." And what's more here is that Blizzard previously had kept the door open for more Old God content, even at BlizzCon, and some of the text hints at this, saying this: "It can't be, we still carry his gift." So, is it all part of the plan for him to be defeated? Well, let's just say I've got a lore video on that topic in the works. Then further broadcast text from Dark Ranger veteran Valinara actually confirms that she and presumably most of the other Dark Rangers are actually loyal to the Horde. And that's quite a 180 considering where they were only a few patches ago, but I mean, hey, it's BFA writing, things sure do move pretty fast in terms of the motivations. Next then, Bolvar has sensed a threat to the future of Azeroth and has began raising up his new Death Knights. New broadcast text has surfaced in which you see Bolvar and High Lord Morgraine talk with the new Death Knights. It's basically their intro little cutscene, and that even includes a nod to them being allied races. So, of course, that's, like, we knew that was happening, right? People who pre-order Shadowlands will be able to roll an allied race Death Knight in patch 8.3. Which is probably going to be a pretty major financial thing for Blizzard if the previous BFA pre-order was anything to go by. And then finally, we've seen the first of the new Shadowlands character customization. So characters with glowing eyes will have further variation in tone and color, with, I think, a more refined effect that's a good bit more localized to their eyes. Yes, you don't have fog lights in your eyes now, but I actually think it looks far more like a part of the character and is a pretty darn large improvement. Okay, next, the PTR. So the Gouged Eye of N'Zoth has been added to the PTR. This item allows players to add a socket to any piece of gear that does not already have one. Now it, along with the Vessels of Horrific Visions and the Wicked Swarmer mount, are sold by Rathium. And this is all actually quite interesting in the context of BlizzCon, where Ian said that sockets and benthic gear were too powerful, and where Blizzard generally were quite anti-RNG. Well, we see Titan Forging be cut down a little bit because of, Titan Forging is not a thing. Corrupted gear just doesn't have some of the same issues that Titan Forging has, so you've got that, and then of course you've also got sockets that you sort of deal with in an entirely deterministic fashion. I mean, at least on the surface there, it does seem like they're actually, true to their word. I mean, there certainly is more player agency in choosing what bit of gear actually gets a socket, so I think that's pretty cool. Now, interestingly, the sockets use the same currency as the mount, with the mount costing the equivalent of 4 sockets. Now, currently the sockets cost 25,000 mementos, while the mount costs 100,000. Now, those mementos, these rewards, these are tied to Horrific Visions, and access to those is gated by weekly resource acquisition. So generally, as the weeks roll on, it means the players will have more and more additional sockets, and they'll be able to wear more corrupted gear. And this is going to act as a steady increase in player power throughout the patch, likely averaging out, I'd say, to be about the same as Titan Forging, but maybe in a way that is a bit more consistent and maybe offers players more choice. Now, thus far, we have covered changes that I think are pretty much in line with the principles espoused over BlizzCon, but now it's it's time for one thing that does run counter to the design of Shadowlands, the infinite trait. Yes, the Heart of Azeroth is going to have an infinite trait. Each level of this trait will increase your corruption resistance by 1, and that means that yes, it'll let you wear more corrupted gear. So aside from any, say, heart essences, corruption resistant just comes from powering up your legendary and then grinding out some AP. Now, Ian announced the end of infinite AP grinding to the cheers of the BlizzCon audience, so I think in that context this is a strange move, although it does make sense within the context of BFA's design. Though thankfully there is one nice thing they did on the PTR. They reduced the level requirements for like the new miner slots, so that was at least a good move that'll give you the lion's share of the power a little bit earlier. Okay, so that's a lot of things. How does this like grind actually stack up? Well, completing the main objective of a horrific vision gives you about 500 corrupted mementos, then completing the side objectives gives you 200 each, and then failing to do any objective will give you 50. So overall, a full run from those like objectives could give you 1300 mementos, but you also get them from killing mobs. Every like couple of packs gave us like 40 to 80, and that means that basically a socket is like 10 to 20 full runs. Now, mementos, of course, from other locations, like they could change that, but purely on horrific visions, that's what it looks like right now. Really though, we'll just have to wait and see how this is balanced. Like, how many runs can you do per week? Will the rewards per run change? Right now, it is kind of hard to tell because it is PTR, and this is an early 2020 patch. Overall though, I think some of this feels like a kind of a counter to the powerful nature of sockets without actually nerfing them right now, while giving players a way to tailor their progression, and of course creating a new progression system in the game for players to go through. This certainly will be a massive grind for serious players, yes, and that's especially when combined with the infinite AP grind that they will want to do. And that grind will be pretty severe, I think, because the corrupted effects are super powerful. Assuming you are never limited by how much corrupted gear you have, and you're instead limited by how much you can realistically wear, then that really will just dare people to grind AP against the diminishing returns super hard. Now, as for the socket grind, well, it is capped in terms of weekly effort because of the horrific vision entry resource requirements, so that'll be mandatory feeling, yes, but I don't think it's going to be that excessive. Of course, that's not all for 8.3 though. So talk of corruption has been everywhere recently, and with its powerful fixes come consequences, so we've all been waiting to see how the cleansing system for corrupted gear is going to work. Well, cleansing unlocks at the beginning of the patch 8.3 quest chain, and it's offered by Mother. It has been confirmed that cleansing an item will remove both the positive affix and the corruption. Now, this only costs 5 corrupted mementos, which seems super cheap. It's yet to be confirmed if that's like final, if the cost will scale if you do it more, but it seems like it's going to be pretty darn cheap. So that's how that works, and before we circle back to it, we've got to talk a little bit more about corruption. So we've now seen the majority of corrupted weapons that drop from the Ny'alotha bosses be data mined on the PTR. Now, these are powerful weapons with a static corruption score, and it's one that thus far we don't actually think like can actually be cleansed. The only items notwithstanding being a caster staff and an offhand item. Now, this is a little controversial. So corruption means basically future potential power and gear. Cleansing that corruption removes that potential power in the future. So I fear here that Blizzard are creating a system where you'll have to remove your gear's future potential in order to wear it now. And that to me does sound like a recipe for disappointment. And I think this is especially the case if wielding your new weapon just forces you to sacrifice other slots. And really with this, I just think back to the famous KISS axiom. Keep it simple, stupid. This just does feel like systems on top of systems for really no like good reason. I don't think this stuff's actually going to add that much fun or depth or enjoyment to the game, and I think instead it just kind of, it's a new thing, a new chore you've got to deal with, and I'm not particularly convinced with it right now. Of course, feedback for this system is extremely important because it's been heavily suggested that corrupted gear is kind of a template for what they want to do in the future with Shadowlands, meaning that your feedback really is vital at this time. And then finally, let's just round out the PTR with the Darkmoon Faire edition. So, the Darkmoon Faire is now going to host 6 arcade games. We've got Minesweeper, there's a Match 3, and the Shaman class Order Hall game, amongst others. Overall, I mean, hey, they've been making those little mini games. Seems like a pretty sane thing to do, pretty darn reasonable, and hey, the more they put in the fair, the merrier. And with that covered, let's hop over to live. So, Alterac Valley, the actual one, really did see a lot of change over time, and it turns out the Anniversary Edition, well, is no different, having seen 2 hotfixes so so far. Now, the most recent hotfix implemented on the 12th of November was kind of interesting, so it reworked the way that players received the time-warped badges that you need for the mount. So initially, badges were awarded for doing a range of quests, including taking supplies from the mines and killing the rams and the wolves. Now, the sort of problem here is that these methods were more efficient than, just winning the battleground, and this basically led to players pretty much just grinding the repeatable quests instead of playing the objectives. So, Blizzard have doubled the reward for winning, and they've actually removed the repeatable badge reward quests. And, a part of me does wonder if the loss of the repeatable quests there is unfortunate, because that kind of was part of the experience, but, I do understand Blizzard's problem here. At the end of the day, many people are just going there for the mount. They actually don't want an authentic PvP AV experience, so they're just going to gravitate to whatever is the most efficient. Quite a challenging thing to balance around, and it's certainly something you've got to deal with whenever you put a reward in a type of content that maybe not everyone's going to love because of its inherent nature. And with that, let's move on from a classic-related thing to, well, classic itself. Layering is gone, and some servers really are feeling the sting. Faralina, Herod, and Whitemane US are experiencing the largest queue times, going up to like 200 minutes. Now, on EU, the queue times haven't been as long, but they're still pretty significant, with Shazrath having queues of over 60 minutes. It does, however, seem that the realm populations are beginning to level out overall, with Blizzard also continuing to offer a whole big range of free realm transfers. Now, this is all, of course, to facilitate the launch of Classic Phase 2, which, because of its world bosses, really did necessitate not having layering. Now, on the run-up to the second phase, there were a lot of anxieties within the player base over the workability of world PvP, and this mainly stemmed from the varying levels of realm population and how heavily some realms are actually weighted to a particular faction, especially the Horde. Let's be real, it's PvP. That comes as no surprise, because PvPers traditionally have been Horde biased, with, say, Will of the Forsaken and Orcs hardiness giving them a pretty good crowd control like mitigation. So that's been quite the thing for the classic community. Now, the forum has been asking Blizzard to facilitate faction-specific realm transfers, and thankfully, Blizzard have actually answered by offering those transfers. So Noggin Fodder and Shazrath EU have a transfer window for Horde characters to move over to Bloodfang, Dragonfang, Earthshaker, and Judgment. Now, yes, this probably could have came a bit quicker, but I do think it's a really good move, and it's nice to see Blizzard be, properly responsive to the community there. Next, though, we've got a pretty interesting classic topic. Is it better to abide by the spirit of the classic experience, or better to abide by the practical reality of 2006's vanilla? Well, Blizzard has somewhat given their position on this. Guards in Gadgetzan, Booty Bay, and Everlook now have a significantly longer range for their ranged attacks, with players being able to abuse this in certain locations to kill enemy players without consequence. Now, this is a definite change from the original game, but it's one that the developers have actually explained, saying this disruption is against our terms of service as it was in 2006, and they say they will enforce the authentically intended consequence of PvPing in a goblin city. They further stated they're actually going to be taking action against players who have knowingly exploited this issue. So, I think a very interesting situation. Now, there is another one there. Blizzard previously had stated that keyrings would launch with the first patch of Classic, but they've now had to confirm that, well, a patch and a phase is different. Why? Well, it's actually kind of interesting. Unlocking a phase is simple. The content is there. That's it. Just turn it on. Changing the UI, though, well, that does actually require a client patch, so that's why it's delayed. Will there be, being no keychain? Will that ruin Classic Phase 2? Somehow, I don't think so, but it's an interesting little technical thing. So, there you go. That is it for the World of Warcraft news. It's actually quite nice now. We're really seeing, between the PTR and there being things going on in live and Classic and just the meta Blizzard stuff and Shadowlands, there's basically so much to talk about in all these episodes. It's really nice that there's a kind of a good diverse spread of topics for us to get into. I think overall, I'm the most interested, though, in your feedback on the patch 8.3 systems changes, like how corrupted gear works, all of that stuff. It's pretty clear that is partially a template for Shadowlands, or at the very least, they're paying very careful attention to it. So definitely your thoughts, your opinions, your feedback. I would love to hear just what you think about it down below. So thank you very much for watching. A massive thank you to our patrons for supporting the channel. You've already seen a lot of the benefits in yesterday's video that their support's been able to bring, and well, hey, we've got the pins. The pins are really nice, and they're running this month, so a massive thank you to them. And with that, I will see you next time.